Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I pulled up to the valet with exactly 4 minutes to spare, 3 hours on I-95, dressed in heels and a navy sheath dress I hadn't worn since a promotion ceremony I didn't invite anyone to. I'd triple-checked the date. Saturday, 6 p.m., Dad's retirement gala at the Langford Grand Hotel, Richmond, Virginia. Black tie optional, but knowing him, optional didn't mean anything. Inside, the place looked like a wedding for someone rich enough to have regrets. Gold drapes, floral centerpieces tall as toddlers, white-gloved servers walking around with champagne flutes already sweating in the AC. At the checkpoint, a young guy in a tux checked names on a tablet. "Last name?" he asked, barely looking up. "Carter." "Julia." He tapped, swiped, frowned. "I'm not seeing that one." "Is it under a different name?" "No, it should be under Julia Carter. I got the invite." I opened my phone and held up the email. It had the banner, the logo, everything. He winced. "Yeah, sorry. This one's RSVP only. Your name's not on the final list. I really can't let you through without the wristband." I stood there for half a second, letting the words set in. The music behind him pulsed through the ballroom doors. A muffled voice echoed from inside, familiar and too loud. "Trust me," my father said, laughing. "If she were invited, she'd already be in here running surveillance." Some people chuckled, not polite chuckles. Real ones. The kind you don't stop yourself from doing because you don't think the target is in the room. I didn't turn my head. I didn't breathe. I just stepped aside like I'd forgotten something in the car. The kid at the checkpoint looked sorry. I could tell he was about to say something, but I waved it off. "Quick note, before we go further, tell us which city or country you're watching from." I walked straight back through the lobby, heels clicking fast. Not angry, just focused. The elevator dinged. A little girl in a white dress asked her mom if I was a spy. Out in the parking lot, the heat punched me in the face again. I popped my trunk and stared at the garment bag for a second. Next to it, still tucked under the strap, was the envelope I'd gotten 2 weeks ago. No stamp, no postmark. Just slid under my apartment door like an afterthought. Inside, no RSVP card, no return address, just the flyer. I shut the trunk hard enough to rattle the next car over. Then I got in the driver's seat and sat. Quiet, hands tight on the wheel. No tears, just pressure, like standing at the locked front door of a house that was supposed to be yours. But the key was never made for you. I sat there for a long time in that parking lot, fingers still wrapped around the wheel like I was waiting for a light to turn green. Nothing around me moved, but my brain wouldn't shut up. It just dragged me straight back, like it always did, into the rhythm of our house growing up. Our house ran on a tight schedule. Dad was a fire chief, which meant everything had to be efficient, precise, clean. Beds made by 7, shoes lined up at the door, no talking during dinner unless you were spoken to, and even then, only if your comment moved the conversation forward. That was his phrase, move the conversation forward. Sean did just fine in that world. He was loud in the way my dad liked, confident, funny, physical. He played 3 sports by middle school, started lifting weights by 9th grade. They used to call him Little Chief at the station, and he ate that up. He was down there every weekend, polishing trucks, helping the guys load hoses. Sometimes they let him ride along, if it wasn't a real call. I went a few times. Once, I asked a firefighter if I could look at the control panels on the back of the ladder truck. The guy looked over at my dad, like he needed permission. Dad just said, "She's more into computers than fires?" and kept talking to Sean about engine maintenance. I got the message, so I stuck to the garage. I had a little workbench in the corner, under the shelf with the paint cans and the dusty stack of old manuals. I liked taking things apart. Radios, remote controls, broken clocks, and figuring out how they ticked. Once I built a robotic arm that could grip a pencil and write my name. My mom clapped. Dad said, "Very cool," and then asked if I wanted to come toss the football with Sean. That kind of thing happened a lot. Sean scored 2 touchdowns at the homecoming game, and we threw a full tailgate in the driveway. Burgers, banners, neighbors, music. I came in second at the regional robotics meet that same fall. Qualified for state. I told them over dinner. My mom smiled and said, "That's great, sweetie." My dad said, "You always were a little brainiac," then asked Sean if he wanted to drive the Bronco that weekend. Every compliment I ever got came with a shrug. Not because they didn't care, but because I didn't fit the choreography. The rhythm of our family had been choreographed long before I learned to talk. Sean was the front man. I was the one who didn't drop the baton, stayed out of the way, never caused problems. Even in pictures, I always looked like I wandered into the shot by mistake. Once, during our cousin Brian's wedding, everyone lined up for a big family photo. I was in the second row. Right before the photographer clicked the shutter, I stepped sideways, just one step out. Nobody said a word. When the framed photo showed up in our hallway months later, it didn't look like anyone was missing. My mom noticed once, years later, that I wasn't in one of the birthday party photos. "You must have gone to the bathroom," she said, brushing crumbs off the kitchen counter. "I was holding the camera," I told her. She blinked, nodded softly, and said, "Well, we know you were there. That's what counts." That was her way. Soft voice, half smile, always trying to smooth over whatever Dad had stomped across earlier. Whenever I'd get quiet, she'd say, "Your father means well. He just has a hard time showing it." Yeah, maybe. But that didn't make it feel any different when I was 14, standing in the driveway, holding a circuit board I soldered myself, while Sean peeled out in Dad's truck with everyone waving behind him. Or when I brought home a state medal for programming and got a pat on the back before the conversation switched to firehouse politics. It was like the rules were set. Sean got cheers, I got nods, he got presents, I got permission. And I learned real quick, if you want to stay sane in a house like that, you keep your wins to yourself and stop expecting a seat at the table. So I did. By the time I was 22, I stopped trying to fit the Carter routine. I didn't tell anyone when I left for DC. I packed my hatchback, turned off my phone, and drove until the gas light came on. My degree was in electrical engineering, but I'd spent 2 years after college buried in defense contracting jobs nobody could explain over dinner. The kind where your name never goes on the paperwork. Eventually, I got approached, quietly, by someone in a federal emergency unit focused on infrastructure sabotage. That's the part they let us say out loud. Infrastructure sabotage. The rest stayed buried. My job was tracking cyber threats to national systems, energy grids, water networks, rail lines, and coordinating silent takedowns before anything blew up. We were the net before the net. No press, no medals. Just long hours in basements that hummed like server rooms and buzzed with tension. One winter, we stopped a blackout plan targeting 6 cities in the Midwest. Domestic group, smart, patient. One wrong move and 50,000 homes would have gone dark during a cold snap. Instead, we rerouted signal paths, quarantined corrupted nodes, and ran quiet patches without triggering a single alarm. The public never knew. The press release that followed mentioned unspecified federal coordination. That was us. Unnamed, invisible, and 100% effective. That same week, Sean did a live interview from a flood zone in Tennessee, standing ankle-deep in water, holding a rescued dog. My mom shared the clip on Facebook with the caption, "So proud of our hero." I clicked the like button and closed the app. Our unit didn't do celebrations. We did coffee and fluorescent lights. My promotion to division lead came in a small windowless conference room with 5 people, one of whom was on Zoom and muted. I got a laminated badge upgrade and an extra parking spot I never used. I texted my mom afterward. "Just got promoted." Lead of the whole division? Nothing, not even a thumbs up. 3 days later, Sean posted a photo from his firefighter award dinner. Full dress blues, plaque in hand, Dad behind him beaming like it was the birth of Christ. The caption read, "Making the old man proud." I stared at the screen for maybe a minute, then I powered it off. See, I didn't join this agency for attention. I didn't want my face on posters or some damn ceremony. But you spend a decade catching bombs before they go off, and yeah, part of you wants to know someone noticed. I worked out of bunkers and sealed buildings, bouncing between states, sometimes countries. My badge had no name, just a number and clearance level. Sean worked in open-air zones where kids would run up to him and say thanks. I had to destroy my notebooks every time we switched facilities. One time, I came home for Thanksgiving, and Dad asked if I was still doing the computer thing. I told him I was helping protect water infrastructure on the East Coast. He nodded like I'd just said I fixed printers for a living. Mom stepped in with that soft smile and said, "Your brother's team pulled 3 people out of a collapsed basement last month. There was a whole article about it," I said. I saw. Nobody asked what I had done that month. I'd spent it inside a locked site in Northern Virginia, trying to prevent a cyber breach from wiping out the command network for East Coast Rail. We stopped it. The story never made the news. No threat means no coverage. That was the job. And after a while, I stopped trying to explain it. That pattern stuck. Every milestone I hit, I sent it off like a postcard into a mailbox with no return address. When I moved into my first place in DC, small one bedroom, concrete walls, terrible light, I texted mom a photo of the keys. Nothing. When I got my top secret clearance, I called to tell her. Voicemail. That's great, honey, she eventually said 2 weeks later, in the middle of a conversation about Sean's new boat. By then, I'd learned not to expect anything. Not questions, not curiosity, not even confusion. Just silence. Like the more I rose, the more invisible I became. I got promoted again. Twice. I had people reporting to me from 5 regions. I ran daily briefings with department heads and military liaisons, but every time I visited home, my dad would say something like, "You still doing that keyboard stuff?" One night, after a 12-hour shift, I opened Facebook to see he'd reposted a news article about Sean getting featured in Firehouse Weekly. Caption said, "Proud to see the legacy carried on." That one hit me harder than I expected. Legacy. Like I wasn't even part of it. Like all I'd ever been was the side character with a laptop and a lanyard. The truth, I'd done more for national safety than any Carter ever had. There was a moment, a Tuesday night, raining, cold as hell, when we stopped a potential gas explosion under a city block in Philly. Domestic actor tried to trigger a utility chain that would have leveled 2 buildings, maybe more. My team isolated the breach, ran a manual override, and locked it down under 7 minutes. If we'd missed the window by even 30 seconds, we'd have been watching body counts on the news for weeks. I remember sitting in the operations room after, blinking at the screen, heartbeat finally slowing. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. We just sat there, letting the silence mean something. That moment, it was the proudest I've ever been in my life. And I couldn't tell a single person. It was classified. Meanwhile, Sean posted a photo that same night of him holding a baby goat at a charity cookout. Got 300 likes. My dad commented, "That's my boy. I'm not bitter. I swear I'm not." But there's a difference between being overlooked and being erased. I started to believe that to them, I'd always just be good at computers, a tech helper, someone they'd call when the Wi-Fi went down, not someone running tactical decisions in real time while 3 federal departments watch the clock. But here's the thing. You do that long enough, you stop needing the spotlight. Because you realize the country runs on people who don't get named. The air stays clean, the lights stay on, the water stays drinkable. Because someone behind a locked door made sure it did. That someone was me. And if my dad never saw it, if my brother never asked, if my mom kept changing the subject, I could live with that. Because somewhere out there, people went home safe who wouldn't have otherwise. Kids went to school. Stores opened, buses ran, streets stayed lit. They'll never know my name. But they lived because of it. I stayed parked under that flickering lot light, engine off, hands flat on my thighs. The hum of the gala carried through the pavement like a dull vibration. Faint music, bursts of laughter, my father's voice cutting through it all like a damn MC. The security guy hadn't made a mistake. My name wasn't on the list because they never put it there. Not an oversight. Not a mix-up. A choice. I popped the trunk. The garment bag was right where I left it, zipped up tight, still creased from the dry cleaner. I pulled it out and laid it across the back seat. Even then, part of me paused. Stupid muscle memory. Like I was waiting for permission that was never coming. Screw that. I unzipped it. Inside was my navy blue dress uniform. No sequins, no glitter, just clean lines, thick fabric, sharp stitching. All of it earned. I changed in the back of the car, one piece at a time, no rush. The weight of the uniform settled over me like concrete. Not in a bad way, just heavy with everything it stood for. Years of missed holidays, funerals I couldn't attend, birthdays I forgot on purpose, dates I bailed on, calls I couldn't return, things I couldn't tell anyone, even if they'd cared enough to ask. The boots went on next, not standard heels, regulation low-rise, polished down to the leather. Then the belt, the jacket, the badge plate. I clipped my agency pin just above the left pocket, the same pocket that held 2 encrypted keys and the photo of my first operation team. All gone now. Reassigned, retired, burned out. Last was the insignia, Director of Cyber Resilience Division, Department of National Security. I held it in my hand for a second, let the cool metal sink into my fingers. It wasn't flashy, no gold plating, no wreaths or stars, just my title, my role, my responsibility. I fastened it onto my collar like a statement. Nobody gave it to me. I took every damn step to get it. I sat back in the driver's seat, uniform fully on, the world outside still thumping with party music. Some woman in heels walked past my car laughing, holding a gift bag. She didn't even glance in. Didn't matter. I checked myself once in the rearview mirror. No makeup, hair tight in a braid, eyes locked. This wasn't about getting let in. It was about walking in anyway. I stepped out of the car, heels crunching against gravel, the night air thick with heat and old roses from the landscaping. My uniform hugged my shoulders with weight I didn't feel in regular clothes. Not like this. Not with everything on it. The valet glanced over, froze mid-step, then nodded and looked away. No questions. I walked up the drive, past the line of parked SUVs and shiny sedans, toward the hotel entrance like I belonged there. Because I did. Nobody waved me through. Nobody stopped me. The doorman saw the uniform, opened the glass doors, and gave a quick, respectful tilt of his head. Inside, the lobby was buzzing. Laughter echoed under the high ceilings. Clinking glasses, women in floor-length gowns, men in crisp suits, half-buttoned from too much wine. The ballroom doors were still propped open, gold trim glowing under the lights. I heard his voice before I even reached the carpet. 39 years in fire service, and not a single goddamn regret. Well, he chuckled. Except maybe raising a daughter who won't come out of her cave unless it's to hack my thermostat. Louder laughs this time. Full crowd. People clapping, whistling. The MC leaned in with the mic again. But I didn't stop walking. My boots hit the marble floor of the ballroom entrance. Hard, steady. Each step echoed like a gavel. And the noise started to shift. Not all at once. First it was just a few people glancing over. Then more heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. Conversation dipped to a whisper, then dropped out completely. By the time I crossed the threshold, the hush had spread. My father's voice caught, stumbled. That same confidence that could fill any room cracked for half a second. I didn't look at him. I scanned the front rows packed with department heads, fire captains, local politicians, their wives. Every seat taken, except one, dead center. Name card still folded in place. Family. A figure rose from the far side. Black suit, gray buzz cut, sharp jaw. Regional Director Ashland, agency side. I hadn't seen him in person in over a year. He stood up like it had already been arranged. Director Carter, he said, voice clear and calm. Front row. No one moved. It was like the words knocked the whole room sideways. I walked. Not fast, not slow. Just enough to make them look. Every uniformed guest rose. Some stiffly, some without hesitation. The military guys, Homeland staff, emergency response officers, all of them. Not because they knew me, but because they recognized the stripes, the insignia, the discipline it took to wear that uniform. My father didn't speak. Sean sat rigid, eyes locked on me like he was trying to calculate how the hell he missed this happening. The MC fumbled with the mic but didn't say a word. I didn't smile, didn't flinch. I reached the open seat, nodded at Ashland, then turned and faced the room just long enough to see the shift. Not confusion, not pity, recognition. Then I sat. I stood slowly, turned toward the aisle, and started walking the length of the room. Not a single person spoke. Every heel click echoed across that ballroom floor like a metronome ticking through the moment. Crisp, steady, not one step out of line. I passed tables stacked with half-empty wine glasses and plates of filet mignon, past old chiefs I recognized from articles my dad used to clip out and tape to the fridge. A few of them shifted in their seats. One nodded. Another straightened up. Halfway down the aisle, I saw them. My father was still on stage, standing behind the podium, frozen mid-sentence. His mouth was slightly open, like he'd been about to say something when the room went still, and just never closed it again. Sean sat to his left, jaw slack, drink sweating in his hand. He didn't blink, just stared like someone had hit the mute button, and he didn't know why. And then there was my mother. Front row, third seat in, hands clasped on her lap. Her eyes followed me like she couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand to her mouth and covered it. I looked back at the seat marked, Family, still open, still waiting. I walked toward it, not because I needed it, but because it had always been off limits. A placeholder, reserved for someone else? Not anymore. When I reached the row, I picked up my cover, sat down without ceremony, and placed it flat on my lap. I didn't adjust my jacket, didn't smooth my skirt, didn't fidget, I just sat. The MC, poor guy, looked like he'd been hit with a gust of wind. He scrambled to stand, paper notes shaking in his hand as he squinted at the back of the room, then down at the podium. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, he cleared his throat, voice shaky. Please welcome Director Julia Carter. The applause started small, a few hands at first, then a few more. Then it built. Not polite claps, not golf course applause, not obligatory. It grew, not wild or chaotic, just strong. Steady, sure. A couple of the uniformed officers in the back row stood again, this time on their own. A woman near the center, Air Force, judging by the ribbons, nodded at me before she joined them. I didn't smile. There was nothing smug in it. No satisfaction, just clarity. Like everything that had been blurry for years had finally snapped into place. I didn't wave, didn't speak, didn't need to. My presence was the point. My silence said everything. No toast could have spoken louder. No plaque could have carried more weight. I was here, in the room, at the front, wearing every hard-earned inch of the life they never asked about. And I didn't need them to clap, but they did. When the lights came back up and the buzz of voices started to return, I stayed seated. I didn't rush to mingle or pretend I needed to catch up. I just waited. One by one, people came over. A tall guy in a FEMA jacket gave me a firm handshake and a look that didn't need translation. A Coast Guard commander nodded once, said nothing, and moved on. A young woman in DHS blues stopped in front of me, didn't introduce herself, just said, "Respect, ma'am," and kept walking. None of them asked questions. They knew. I was still sitting with my cover on my lap when Sean walked up. He looked older than I remembered, more lines around the mouth, more wear in the eyes, not worn down, just real. Like this was the first time he'd walked into a room without the spotlight already turned toward him. He scratched the back of his neck. "How long you been doing all this?" I looked up at him. 15 years. He blinked once, then nodded. "Shit," he said quietly. I didn't laugh. Neither did he. But he didn't walk away either. He stood there a second longer like he wanted to say more, maybe even apologize, but didn't know how to start. That was fine. I wasn't there for apologies. Eventually, he stepped back and gave me a half smile. Not fake, not performative. Then he was gone. The room started to clear out. Servers carried off half-finished plates. Someone wheeled out the podium. The DJ switched to something slower, quieter. The show was over. And then I saw him. My father. He didn't cut through the crowd like he usually did. No booming voice, no handshakes on the way. He walked slow, straight, deliberate. He stopped in front of me and didn't say a word. His eyes dropped to the insignia, then the service bars, then the shoulder braid. He took in every single patch like he was reading a manual he didn't know existed. His mouth stayed shut, but his face changed. Not much, just enough. Then, finally, he gave me a single nod. It was the kind of nod he gave fire captains after a brutal overnight shift, when they didn't ask for thanks and wouldn't have accepted it anyway. No speech, no hug, no mention of the guest list, just that nod. And for the first time in my entire damn life, it felt like enough. 6 months later, I pulled into my parents' driveway like I had 100 times before. Same cracked pavement, same rust spot on the garage door that no one ever painted over. But the air felt different, lighter somehow. I walked in through the side door. My mom yelled from the kitchen, "Take your shoes off if they're muddy," like I was still 13. I almost smiled. Inside the living room, I froze. The display case was still there. Cherry wood, dusty glass, lit from the top with a yellow bulb that hummed if you stood too close. Sean's medals, plaques, and football photos filled most of it, like always. But now, on the right side, there was a new row. My uniform photo, my plaque. Right next to his, same size, same lighting. I stepped closer. The caption under my photo read, "Director Julia Carter, Department of National Security." It didn't feel like a correction. It felt like an update. My mom called again. "Dinner's getting cold." At the table, she'd made meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Dad's favorite. Sean was already halfway through a second helping. He looked up and said, "You still can't cook, right?" "Not unless you want me to set off the fire alarm," I said. He grinned. "Good. I like having one thing over you." The jokes landed softer now, no edge to them. We ate for a while without saying much, just forks and the hum of the old ceiling fan. Then my dad cleared his throat. "That thing in Atlanta last month," he said, not looking up from his plate. That wasn't you, was it? I paused. Which part? The one with the signal disruption. Shut down near the rail lines, I nodded once. Parts of it. He didn't say good job. He didn't ask for details, just nodded like I'd confirmed what he already figured. Then my mom, still spooning peas onto her plate, said, "Do they ever let you talk about the stuff you do? Or is it all secret?" "Some of it I can share," I said. "Not most." She didn't change the subject, didn't shift the conversation back to Sean's boat or the neighbor's knee surgery. She just said, "That must be hard," and kept listening. Sean leaned forward, elbows on the table. "How'd you even get into all that?" "I mean, cyber response? That's not exactly a college job fair booth." I tilted my head. "Honestly?" Got sick of being underestimated, he didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said. "That tracks." And just like that, it wasn't weird. We talked a little more. I left out the classified pieces, obviously, but they didn't push. Sean asked if I'd ever been overseas for work. My dad asked about agency training. My mom poured more tea. There wasn't applause. No emotional speeches, no "we were wrong" moments. But nobody changed the subject. Nobody acted like I wasn't part of the conversation. And after all these years, that was enough. After the dishes were done and the noise settled back into hums and chair creaks, I slipped out the kitchen door and onto the back porch. The night was still. No breeze, no bugs. Just dark sky stretching out like a quiet screen, stars poking through in pieces. I sat down on the old bench swing. The wood creaked the same way it did when I was 10, sneaking outside with a flashlight and a schematic I couldn't stop tracing. Back then, I thought if I figured out enough pieces, I'd finally unlock the code to being seen. I wasted years thinking silence meant failure, that if nobody said anything, it meant I wasn't worth mentioning. But that wasn't true. It just took me longer to understand the difference between being invisible and being uninvited. I lived with that silence so long, it started to sound like background noise. Got used to watching from behind the camera, sliding out of group photos, writing my own wins on sticky notes just so they didn't disappear completely. And now? Now I was in the frame. Not because anyone handed it to me, but because I walked in and took it. The display case inside hadn't changed everything. I didn't expect it to. I didn't need it to. But it wasn't empty of me anymore. And that mattered. Not as proof, not as closure, just as fact. The real shift happened the night I walked into that ballroom without an invite, without backup, without waiting for someone to wave me through. I didn't ask. I didn't knock. I stepped in anyway. That moment didn't need their permission to mean something. It gave me back my voice, steady, grounded, and mine. I leaned back, let my shoulders drop, and closed my eyes. I didn't need applause. I just needed the quiet to belong to me, too. And finally, it did.